All right, recording has started now. So yeah, just keep your mics muted when I unmute all of you. And lastly, for asking a questions, use the Zoom chat options. We already have a bunch of questions that you submitted before while registering for the event. So we're going to kick off with a couple of those questions, and then we're going to open the floor for everybody so that we can have a discussion. And you can also raise your hand if you have a specific questions, and I can allow you to unmute yourself. So before we begin, Caleb, do you want to just give a brief background on yourself, what you do, and your background in VC as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. So yeah, obviously Caleb here, head of programs at entry level. Before I was working at entry level though, before I started a startup with the team at entry level, I spent a lot of time doing a lot of different things. So I was working for a period of time in policy in East Africa. So I'm originally from Ethiopia. So policy in East Africa for a while. I worked in social enterprise. I worked in crowdfunding with Ayush here as well. We used to work together in crowdfunding. Yeah, and a lot of work in like social services as well. So like quite a varied background. And yeah, up until 2020, I was sort of doing a lot of different things, but usually working with startups, working with really cool people. And I really wanted to like blend the love that I have for like meeting new people, you know, sort of building new things and coming up with new ideas to create something incredible. And that's where I learned about venture capital. And venture capital is like this incredible field where really like you get to be the first believers or first set of people who help bring an idea to life. And that idea, if it works, and hopefully it does, can really like change the course of how humans interact in the world. And so it's like one of the most impactful spaces that I can be in. And it sort of uses all these skills that I really love. And I think that's why it's such an exciting space. But unfortunately, it's also quite a hard space to break into, and it's quite elusive on how to get in. So yeah, we had a lot of people ask us to build a venture capital program at entry level, and we launched one at the start of this year. That's probably how you ended up on this call. And yeah, we're all about like showing people how they can break into the VC space. So maybe a little bit on like what I'm doing specifically now is I'm head of programs at entry level, which is great. And on top of that, I'm also the managing partner of Proximity Ventures, which is my venture fund. We invest small checks into companies across the world, but like with a specific focus on Africa. So that's only been the last 7 or so months. And since then I've backed in total, like about 18 companies, looking to back another 20 over the next 9 months. And yeah, it's sort of been the start of my professional investing journey as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that great intro. It's wonderful to hear the multiple hats that you've been donning and currently also doing 2 roles in once. Let's kick off today's event with a question that one of the students asked earlier. According to you, are there any 1 or 2 key skills or competencies that would really increase one's likelihood to succeed in the VC world? So if there were just a couple of skills that one person was to have, what would those key skills would be?
Yeah, the most important thing in venture capital is relationships. So it's really important. Like VC is a relationship game. It's more about who you know, and that exists on quite a few levels. It's like, can you hold a relationship with you know, potential people you might work with, right? So like, can you hold a relationship or maintain and manage a relationship between a partner at a firm to land you that first job? To can you hold multiple relationships with founders who are building things, or maybe people who are like not building products yet, haven't started their company yet, but you know that they have a lot in them and that they eventually will build something incredible. And it's, you know, it's kind of surprising, like the number of founders who the best VCs have backed, who at the time when they met actually weren't doing their own startup. They might have been working growth at another startup, or they might have been like the executive team at a different company. It's really about like, can you build those relationships? And so if you work backwards from that, how do you build relationships? You need great people skills, and people skills meaning like you need to be outgoing. You need to be not just like good at, but like excited to meet with other people and connect with other people. And also doing it like not at a superficial level, but at a level where you genuinely care about other people and you have that interest. And I think that's where you build these great relationships. So to whittle it down, it's like you need great people skills, being able to talk to people, communicate with people, and build relationships. That's like probably the most important thing in venture capital. And probably the most important thing in general if you want to succeed in startups. And then maybe the next most important skill is like, I think it's like being able, this is a very general one, but being able to think clearly. So there, as you sort of go through life and in general, and then also as you invest, there's so many biases that can arise, right? So like when there's a company or a startup that externally looks amazing, they might be in the news every 2 weeks. They might have raised like a lot of money. They might have amazing branding and visuals. Like you sort of, when they're raising money, you sort of get this sense of like, wow, I need to be a part of that because it looks amazing optically. You need to be like a really clear thinker to look past like what all the optics say to understand what's happening behind the scenes, right? And to understand like what, how that business model works, whether it's actually operational. There's a lot of things in startups where like, it's kind of just like smoke and mirrors. You don't actually know what you're getting. And you need to be able to think really clearly about opportunities. And so that means like, to me, that means like just thinking or like reflecting a lot of time, like spending a lot of time thinking about your thinking, if that makes sense. So it's like, how clearly did you think in that instance? You know, like what were the potential factors that were swaying your decision at the time? All of that stuff makes you, in the long term, makes you an incredible investor. So yeah, those would be the top two skills. So relationships and being able to think clearly.
Amazing. Thanks for the in-depth answer. And I can attest to the first one, relationships, because when I was working at Techstars, which is a startup accelerator, but bulk of it's sort of like a VC firm itself because they're investing into startups. They put 100K in 10 startups per year. And in just 1 year, each department, each country, Techstars is just putting 10K in 100K in 10 startups, but the rest of the year, what they do is just relationship building. So they're meeting with founders, talking to them, and looking for the perfect fit that would suit the program, but also is the great culture fit, program fit, and also building relationships with mentors and other investors. So like for 8 months, they just build relationships. And for the remaining 4 months, they actually deliver on the program and invest in startups.
That's awesome. How do they do that, by the way, Ayush? Like what does relationship building look like for Techstars?
For Techstars, so it's an application-based program, so similar to Y Combinator, I would say. But Techstars is, I would say, a bit bigger because they have chapters in major parts of the world. They have a chapter in Bangalore, Singapore, Melbourne, a lot of them in the US, and so like different countries, and some of them focus on specific sectors. So the one in Melbourne was sports technology, sports tech. The one in India was for companies solving for emerging economies using technology. And then there's disability focus. There's they partner with other organizations as well, for example, banks, to deliver fintech programs. But relationship building is mostly meeting with other investors in the network. So other VC firms that are operating in that particular area and looking at their portfolio companies and finding suitable applicants from that. And what they do is encourage those companies to then apply for their program. But they don't want the number of applications is not the metric, quality applications is the metric. So
that's really cool.
How they do it is usually because the managing directors are coming with big, they usually have a big profile, so they already have a big network base already. And Techstars is a reputed name. So VC analysts or operations associates working in Techstars go ahead and like do cold calling or talk with founders and meet new people. And that's the job for most of the year.
That's awesome. Super cool.
Awesome. I'm going to ask the next question, but also invite if anybody has any follow-up questions to Caleb's answers, or if you have any questions of yours, please feel free to put them in the chat or raise your hand if you have a question. All right, we have a question from Jim. What are the 3 common questions you asked founders to navigate through the smoke and mirror? What are the red flags and responses?
That's a great question. Nice. Yeah, that's a good one. So the very first one is like, what problem are you solving, right? Like a good startup is solving a problem. And if like a founder can't answer that question, it's immediately a red flag. Like you need a product focus. And so that's one of the first things. Probably the next thing is like, and this sounds like a really silly question, but I ask it every time and it actually like gets me really far. But it's like, how do you know that that's a problem? Or like, how do you know that that's real? Like, what's proof of that? Can you explain it to me? And sometimes you get really interesting answers from founders. Sometimes like, well, it's obviously real. Like, look at these statistics. What you actually want is like when founders tell you, oh, like I've actually experienced it. I experienced it this time, and this time, and this is what happened. This is why I'm solving it. Or when they say, oh, here's an example of like a company I work with that like is facing this problem that we're solving for them. So you want to ask them like, a good way is just like, what problem are you solving and how do you know it's a problem? Those like two great questions. Yeah, and then the other one is like, you really want, as you're talking to founders, you want to like flag for just like consistency with what they say. So sometimes founders will make big claims and that's okay if it's like, if there's truth behind it. Sometimes there actually isn't, right? And you don't actually know what's going on. And so you really want to make sure that things they're saying they can back up. And a lot of that is what you go through in the due diligence process. So that's like going through all their documents, going through their financials, going through their partnerships to make sure that everything that they've said is lined up. And so you really just want to make sure that there's integrity and that they're saying what is actually true. So those are kind of the three things I would look for in flagging the smoke and mirrors. And then I think the rest of the work is really about like critically analyzing that and coming to a decision as a VC about whether that's investable or not.
Awesome. Wonderful. Next question would be, so as a VC analyst, is it must for a VC analyst to source deals on, like, if you would know the number, like how many deal flows in a typical VC firm are sourced by analysts compared to maybe the senior partners or the directors in a fund?
That's a great question. It's actually a very hard one to answer because every VC fund is different, like very different, and their structures are very different. Sometimes you have VC funds which have like analysts that go and will go find the deals. So they'll go meet other companies. You might have other analysts who literally don't go and find deals themselves. They just go through the inbound. Inbound meaning like sometimes venture capital funds will have websites and VCs and like startups can apply to get funding. And their whole job might actually just be going through all of the inbound applications they get. In other funds, an analyst can have like a very, very active role, right? Like they can be like the face of the firm. So it's actually very hard to answer that. The short answer is like whatever the firm needs and like whatever gap you fill is sort of what you do as a VC analyst. Some of that is, I actually just hired a VC analyst for proximity for my fund. His role right now is like split between half the time he's sourcing deals. So he's looking for companies at the moment. And then the other half of the time he's doing research on the companies that have made it to the next stage with us. So it really depends. But yes, you do need to be able to source deals. That's like a very important thing to have in your arsenal. And what that looks like is kind of like identifying like breakout companies or breakout like industries or trends and sort of going and finding companies that are working in that space and trying to understand what they're doing, keeping tabs, building those relationships. It's quite important. So yeah, so just to summarize that one, the scope of a VC analyst depends on the firm that you're in. But in general, yeah, you probably will be sourcing deals or you'll at least be like analyzing deals that come your way.
Absolutely. Wonderful answer. And I've seen that too, because when I was researching a lot of VC firms, they would have a form to submit a pitch and like just so that I'm sure like the big VC firms have a lot of inbound applications that the VC analysts then look at. And also VC firms tend to send their analysts to a lot of events as well, which the senior directors or partners can't go to. So that forms a part of sourcing as well. And
like the firms, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I interrupted. Go ahead.
Now, just saying, it like for a young fund, it definitely a VC analyst would be involved more in sourcing deals, while in a if it's a senior, if a fund has been around for a long time, they already have so many applications, and analysts might be working with current portfolio companies instead of sourcing deals. So it would depend a lot on the stage of the fund and and which area they're working in.
Definitely. Like I think most the forms online where like you have a VC will have like hundreds, if not thousands, of applications every year. So that is a job in itself. And it's why I don't have a fund website. I'm just like, I don't want that. Like right now I'm trying to like build my processes, and it's too early to have like, hundreds of startups reach out to me. So
Yep.
yeah, so totally agree with that.
Yep, awesome. There was a question from Abdullah. Yes, the recording of this session will be emailed to all of you with some more resources after the event, maybe tomorrow. Before I move on to the question in the chat, I'm going to ask another question that a user submitted. So when preparing to work in venture capital, do you suggest niche? So we should niche down in particular industries, like a couple of industries, or is more the merrier when preparing to work in VC? So as personal expertise in specific industries.
That's a great question. And every time I talk to other people about it, it's always mixed. So I think that the response is kind of like yes and no. So it helps to have one space that you're good at and one space that you have like, superior knowledge in, because then you become the person who the team relies on for that expertise. So I'm trying to think of a good example. So for instance, I have a friend who got hired at like a really big venture capital firm in Australia, like $1 billion venture capital firm. And her background is science. And so she's been a scientist for like years. And so she's like the go-to for anything in deep technology because that's her background. And so sometimes it really helps because you have this sort of niche advantage that other people don't, because you might be a great VC, but you also have like deep technical expertise. You don't necessarily need that though, because I think a lot of firms, especially earlier stage firms, are very like general, and they'll look at a lot of different verticals and industries. So that means that you probably want more of a generalist on the team who can just think really well about a lot of different opportunities. And in my opinion, it's actually way more fun being a generalist because you get to see a lot of different startups, a lot of different problems that are being solved, a lot of different like potential solutions. So yeah, so that's my thinking. I think it's like good to be a generalist, but have a few things that you niche down in and a few things that you can be good at, but never like just do one form of VC or like one industry, because I think that really limits you. Then the next thing I'd add is, if you do decide to go down a path where you're niching down on a subject or like a space, it really helps to actually share your knowledge about that. So share your writing, share the things that you're learning, and be known as that person who's like very niche in a space. And if you do that, like it suddenly becomes very like way easier to get a job as a VC. In fact, if you're an expert in a specific space that not many people understand, VCs will approach you and ask you to work with them. And that's happened a couple of times to a few friends of mine. So yeah, just some additional advice if you do have a niche.
Awesome. That's some great advice. I'm gonna go to the question in the chat. While applying to some, which builds on this question, when applying for VC firms, some of them ask to prepare the bear case for one of their portfolio companies. So what are the best practices for preparing a bear case?
Yeah, that's a good question. I actually don't think I can answer that because I've never done that. I've never done a bear case. And I think that my understanding of that is like a scenario analysis, which is a bit more advanced and technical. And what that looks like is you will have like a range of different scenarios, like one scenario where the company does amazing, one scenario where the company does like as expected, and then one scenario which is the bear case, and that might mean like if the company fails or just like hardly delivers on expectations. I don't actually know what the best way to do that is, because I've never done that sort of technical analysis. I also don't think that technical analysis, and this is just my thinking on this, I don't think that's really needed for the early stage if you're doing seed and pre-seed, because at seed and pre-seed, there's actually like a 90% chance that it will fail. So you're kind of expecting that anyway. Like you expect, basically, 90% of your companies to go to zero in the first place. So you don't need that financial modeling. It's more like it's just it's more of a case if you're investing in Series A onwards. So I think for my stage of investing, it's not as necessary. What I would recommend is just like Googling, because like Google is really your best friend. I still Google a lot of stuff on startup terms, even as an investor deploying checks. So
awesome. Great. Someone asked, what is a bear case? So, I mean, just to really simply explain, it's in stock markets or like in the financial markets, there's the bull market and the bear market. And the bull market is generally where things are on the rise and the market's doing great, and the conditions of the economy are generally going up and favorable. And the bear market is opposite. So economy is receding and stocks are declining in value. So when the question said preparing a bear case, so that probably means the chances of the company not doing well and receding in value or not meeting product market fit or losing its product market fit. Is that correct, Caleb?
Yep. Yeah, I agree. I think that's about accurate. Yeah, so I don't have anything specific on that. It's not really my stage of investing.
Wonderful. For next questions, do you have any tips or hints for transitioning from sell side to buy side?
I don't know what that means. So, like,
that is a question.
I looked at the question, I didn't understand it. Sell side to buy side. That sounds like a marketing thing.
That's, I think, probably like more of a financial markets question.
Yeah. No, again, not really the game I'm in. But this question in the comments looks really good. I actually really like this question. By, I'm gonna butcher this name, sorry, Abdul Rahman. Yeah, so let's assume I have the startup evaluation investment memo ready, and I'm not in any VC firm. What do you suggest I do to make sure that the investor takes a look at my investment memo? Thanks. That's like so good. So like, actually, I think this is how you sort of buy trust or buy those relationships with VC firms. If you send like a beautiful investment memo, which explains the opportunity in like one page, which is like, this is, the company, this is like the traction, this is why I think they're great, these are the market trends. That's a really easy way to like build trust with a lot of investors. And so I think it's like, firstly, it's a great strategy. Secondly, the best way to get it in front of people is to just like DM them on Twitter, DM like senior partners on Twitter or principals on Twitter, DM or like email people on LinkedIn via email and just say, hey, I have this great investment opportunity. What you want to do is just like highlight in 1 or 2 lines why it's great. So you want to say like, it went from 0 to 16,000 signups in like 1 week. This is, just the top level stuff to make sure that people click through. It's almost like writing a marketing email. You're trying to make people be like, wow, this is really interesting, I'm going to have a look. So just explain why it's a great investment in like 1 or 2 sentences, and then just DM a bunch of people. And I think if you do that, at least 1 or 2 of them will like have a look at it and probably respond to you saying, thanks, I'm passing, or thanks, like I'll have a look, I'd like an intro. So
awesome. Great tips. So if someone is preparing for a VC interview, do you have any tips for them? A couple of tips, maybe 2 or 3 tips.
Yeah, okay, cool. So VC interview, I think, okay, so it depends on what sort of firm you're going for. If you're going for an early stage firm, like for instance, I did interviews last week, actually 2 weeks ago, and they were super casual. I just wanted to get to know who the person was. It was more like you're building a startup, and so it's an early team. Like you have the first few people, and it's more about whether you get along than like what are the hard skills. If you're like interviewing for a more established firm that probably has like a few, like 20 mil over under management, then it would probably be a bit more formal. So I think that the main impressions you want to give, maybe 2 things. The first is that you're really curious. And that's like, that shows that you are someone who will go and learn things and you're proactive and have high agency. A way that you can do that is really like talk about or share some of the trends you're looking at or the things that you're most interested by. And also sharing some if you're writing. I think it's really important as a VC to be writing and sharing your learnings. So sharing some of that stuff is like a really good way to show that you're a curious person and that you're interested in different trends. The next thing is to show that you're actually prepared, right? Because like in VC, it actually really pays to be prepared and like to be ahead of the curve, right? And understand who you're talking to, understand like the investment opportunity. And so a really good way to prepare is like do your research on the firm, do your research on like who the partners are and their background. And I'd also just like try to flex a bit and show that you know and you've done your research. So saying things like, hey, I noticed that you did this, this, and this. Can you tell me a bit more about why? Or like, you know, an investment that you like. And then the third one is like, you may be asked like, what's a company you're looking at and why? Come up with like a really interesting answer to that. So maybe a company they don't know or a company that they do know, but might not expect you to suggest. Don't go with the generic like market leaders, because I think that's a bit boring. Yeah.
Awesome. Some great tips again. We have the person who asked the sell side versus buy side questions. We're going to leave that for this discussion, but if anyone's interested in reading what is sell side versus buy side, read the comments. It's more related to hedge funds and investment banks and the big advisory and consultancy firms than venture capital or private equity. I'm going to read the question we have in the chat. Right. So Nihal is asking, he's currently a product marketer at a SaaS company with around 3 years of experience, and he wants to pivot into the VC space, though he don't want to shift his focus from SaaS. What are the initial things that he needs to work on to become a full-time VC analyst?
Yeah, good question. That's possible. I mean, yeah, like I think that SaaS is so big and you probably just want to find a firm that is focused on software as a service. Yeah, I think that's basically the starting point. You find a firm that is focused on that. And I think like the rest of it is really just like you want to be a thought leader. Like the best way to fast track your entrance into venture capital is writing, and it's getting your presence out there, and it's building relationships actively. So if I was you, I'd start writing about the things I'm learning and the things I'm doing in SaaS. And I think that's kind of easy as a product marketer as well. So the sort of stuff you're doing, and also why, like the people you're looking out for or the companies that you find most exciting and why. So talking about that stuff is really important. Really building that brand. The other one is like, if you really just want to be in VC, sometimes it pays to not be picky about which vertical, and it helps to just do everything. So the best shot for someone to get hired is actually not really going to a big VC firm. It's actually going to a smaller one that is looking for people to work with them and looking for like their first set of employees. It's way easier to just be like, hey, I can be valuable in these ways. Like, let me help you for free for now. And then when you're hiring, like, I'm happy to help out. And that's a good way also to train your investing muscle. And I've seen people do that a lot to get their first roles. Yeah, so I think there's a couple ways to break in. But yeah, to summarize, like if you just want to work in SaaS, look for SaaS focused VCs and then start writing about SaaS. If you just want to break into VC, then start helping out VC firms or like trying to meet with, emerging managers to support them.
Awesome. There's an interesting thing you mentioned, that helping the VC firms for free and then turning into a paid employee when they are hiring, which there is a question that was submitted on that I'm going to ask next. But before that, we have 10 more minutes. So if anyone has any other questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Any questions related to the program as well, if you have any confusions or questions, because we're going to wrap up in 10 minutes. So someone had asked, is volunteer work taboo when trying to get a VC experience? Oh no, I mean, first thinking, I think it's not. Volunteer work is, I don't think it's taboo anywhere, because it gives you valid experience and gets you started in an industry and make connections where you don't have. But I'm going to let you just like shed some light on that as well. And I'm also curious to just understand why this person would think volunteer experience is taboo. But if you have any points to feel to help people be comfortable with volunteer work in the VC space.
Yeah, I think I can actually understand why it might be taboo, right? Like, especially here, it's like if you intern at a company or like volunteer at a company, it's a bit weird because the company should be able to pay your wages. They should pay you at least a stipend, whatever. Like, it is a bit weird to volunteer and not get paid. So I understand that. It's not taboo in VC, and it's also not taboo in startups because like there's scarcity in both of them. Like in venture capital, there's not enough roles. And so the only way to get your foot in the door and get that experience is actually volunteering. There's no other way really to do it. And then in startups, there's like just not enough money. And so like you volunteer because you want access to a startup, but you actually can't, like you can't be paid at it because there's not enough funds. So yeah, I think it's super normal. It's super normal in this space. And it's kind of like the rite of passage for a lot of people. Like you volunteer as a VC, you help out like someone who's investing, whether it's with market research or with admin stuff. And then you get more and more opportunities as you get more tapped into the world. So yeah, I think that like totally normal. I've seen it happen. I don't like doing it. I'd rather pay people. I think people should be paid for their time. And that's just my thing. So I pay people I work with. But quite a few people just take volunteers. So
absolutely makes sense. Building on working in VC, Diane is asking if she's looking to intern in with venture capital firms, is it best to reach out to people through LinkedIn, or do you have any suggestions on other ways to look for VC experiences? Yeah. What's the best way for this industry?
Yeah, so there's a few things. So LinkedIn is great. LinkedIn is probably one of the best. Even better is Twitter. Twitter is really good. Twitter is like very fast. A lot of VCs are on Twitter. So I'd say LinkedIn and Twitter are the top two. If you want the best shot, like you really want to convey the value you can bring like really quickly and upfront. And sometimes the best way to do that's by email. So it's saying, hey, like, look, I have expertise in X, Y, and Z. I want to help you. And here are the things I can do. And like, here are the details, like, you know, here's how quickly I can start. Stuff like that is really helpful. So when you're like very articulate about like how you'll provide support, there's probably not any good VC sites for that, but like a really easy way is just like look up venture capital and then the region that you're trying to do VC in, and a whole list of search results will come up either on Google or LinkedIn. So yeah.
And I would also suggest like going from VC events that are happening in your region or maybe online. There's a lot of events and panel discussions that happen online. So join them, connect with people who are attending those events because those people are your tribe. There's the startup weekend that happens in many countries around the world, and entrepreneurial hackathons that happens where you will find entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs usually go to VC. So that's how you expand your network. I think this is a question that you might enjoy answering, Caleb. The Chinese are investing into Africa in recent years. So why is it, in your opinion, a hotbed region at the moment? So why is Africa so popular in these times? Because you are investing in the region too. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah. So I think like the Chinese are investing in Africa. I think it's a bit different to venture capital. Like I think they're less active when it comes to venture capital. They're more active when it comes to like debt financing and like infrastructure. That's a whole can of worms. I'm probably not going to dive into why China's investing in Africa because it's a whole thing and it can be a bit controversial. But Africa is a huge opportunity right now for a few reasons. It's essentially the last tech frontier, in that like tech is like really quickly been adopted across the world, and it's the last place where tech is still really booming and is really like meteorically on the rise. And that's really interesting because like in Africa, there's a lot of problems that still haven't been solved and aren't solved by governments, and they're not solved by like nonprofits, and they're not solved by corporates. So startups essentially become service providers. Like they provide like infrastructure that helps really bridge like and create create services for people who don't have those services otherwise. So for me, it's like this intersection of impact and also like returns. For African consumers, it's more like, oh man, we finally get to access consistent energy, or like have financial products that help like let us transfer money, things that really impact their livelihoods. So tech just is kind of different in nature there. And now with like mobile and internet penetration growing really quickly, it's like the perfect time to be starting a company in Africa. So that's why I'm bullish on Africa right now. Yeah.
Amazing. Great answer. All right. Call for last questions if you have any. I have a second last question. So this is more of related to the program as well. Nihal is finding it really hard to find the valuations of a company online, and he's curious to know how VCs value startups at a very early stage. So pre-seed startups. And he also has a question from Stripe that we have in the program. So if you want to read that in the chat.
So it's very hard. Like, I mean, buying a company is just like finger in the air. Like, you don't really know. Like, you kind of just guess it. And sometimes it's ridiculous. Like, sometimes, it really varies. Sometimes you'll meet like the best founder, one of the most impressive founders, and they're investing, they're raising money at a pre-seed stage where they have a bit of traction, and they're raising it just a very low valuation, like very low. Other times you'll have a really good founder who's raising it like triple the valuation. And so it really depends on the company. Usually the valuation is set by the lead investor, and the lead investor is the one who puts the most money in. They get to dictate what value they take the company at. If the company agrees, they have the right to opt in or walk away. Usually it's a mix of things. So at pre-seed, it's like, what is the space? How strong is the founder? And then what existing traction do they have already? Have they already got like a couple thousand users? Or how quickly are they growing? And how far in the build are they? So a lot of these things really weigh it up. Once you start bringing revenue into the equation, it makes it a bit easier to value a company. But before that, it's really about like, how strong is the founder? How interesting is the space? And what's the traction so far? So there's no like hard and fast rule. It's a bit more about feeling than anything. Yeah.
Early stages are feeling based.
Yeah. It's also like how baller the founder is. Like, I don't know. Like if the founder's just like, yo, this is my valuation, you take it or leave it. In a lot of cases, like VCs, if it's a strong founder, will be like, yeah, okay, fine, we'll take it. Like, so it really does depend on how good the founder is at maneuvering.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. We have a couple more questions and a couple more minutes, so we can go through them quickly. Ash is asking, what should one expect to learn from a VC firm to teach them if they join as an analyst or any junior or executive position? I'm not really sure what exactly is the question, Ash.
Do you want to ask the question, Ash? Like, can we?
Yeah. Hi.
Hey.
Thanks for organizing this. Hi. So I wanted to ask if I join, right, a VC firm, and if I'm joining as an analyst or any junior role, right? So I think the only way I can grow is to follow a leader who is way smarter than me and teach me the ways. So if we talk about an idealistic leader or a firm, right, we understand there's a lot of chaos going on in VC firm in general, right? Because there's so many hands to do. What would be an idealistic position that one can teach me? What should I expect from a good leader in terms of following them? Because if I am getting involved, my plan is to stay involved for the next 15 years, 20 years, right? So how exactly we can work that out? So that's what I want to understand.
Yeah, that's a great question. So firstly is like, yeah, if you join a firm, you should be working closely with a partner or with someone who's senior to you, who helps guide you in that process and helps you become a better investor. Yeah, there's probably two things. I would say the first one is like freedom to call your own shots. And that means like, when you find a company, if you they can help guide you through the thinking, but if you're high conviction and you believe in the company, then like they'll let you make that decision to invest. They won't actually say no, if you're high enough conviction. That doesn't always happen because, it's not like it's hard to have that level of trust, especially if you're junior. But it's important that they do let you say like, hey, actually, no, I really think this is an opportunity, and explain your why. And if that why holds up to everyone's arguments, then like they'll give you that freedom or that autonomy to make the decision. That's really important. The next one is, what is the next one? I think the next one is just like that they are keen to show you the ropes and show you like how they thought about investing and their framework, and that they let you develop your own style, because I think people have their own style of thinking about companies, and pretty often like everyone's style can become amalgamated into one. It gets very similar. Like I remember when I started Proximity with AJ, who's my partner in Proximity, we had very different ways of thinking and we disagree a lot of the time. And now we're very similar. And that's actually a bad thing. That's not a good thing. You want people with very different forms of thinking to like come in with different perspectives and who want to play devil's advocate. So I guess like the second thing is that they let you develop and explore your own style of thinking about investment opportunities. So those are the two that I'd suggest.
Yeah, thanks so much for asking. Sounds good. Thanks.
Awesome. Great. Last question for the day, Caleb. What do you think is the best way? So this is more catered to the African VC space, to get the word out for more VC openings or build communities in the African space, seeing that the opportunities are huge and the market is growing. So if someone is keen to do that, what should they do?
Yeah.
And
I'm gonna guess that
I guess it's the same as like not only in Africa, but the answer might be relevant for other people as well in other communities, because VC as a field is growing quite fast, but still it's hard to find those VC openings or have a central space where people can gather and meet other like-minded people or like have common communities.
Yeah, I'm gonna take this question as Samuel's asking how to like learn more about the VC openings and the space there. I'm guessing that that's what it is, right? Not like how do firms do that more. I think the best way to do it. So there's a few things here. If you're the person who connects like individuals to opportunities, that's like a pretty powerful position to have. And those people like find it pretty easy to raise money and to find their first sort of set of jobs. So there's a really interesting group called Gen Z VCs, which is a big Slack group. There's like heaps of opportunities on there. It's not the best community, but it's like one of the biggest. I think there's like 20,000 people who want to get into VC there. That woman who started that like has so much clout that she could join any firm that she wanted. So if you started something similar, which is like a community for for people in Africa or like your region or with an interest in a specific thing who want to get into venture capital, which is really easy to do, there's a massive opportunity there for you to build your own community there and find more opportunities and be that connector. So that's a really easy way to like become known in the VC space. Now, if you're looking for opportunities in VC, I would just say like, it depends on how much you want it. If you really want a position in VC, then go and like figure out like what your value proposition is, and then just DM like every single VC that you know or that like you can find, and just see how you can help, and start interning and volunteering. In the meantime, it's really important to build your own brand and profile. So like start writing. Writing is one of the most effective ways to bring people to you. It's helped me find some of the best founders I've met. It's helped me like get into deals that have been closed for months. It's helped me meet like people who've invested in my fund. So like it's the most important thing you can do is writing and getting your public profile out there. It can be podcasting too. It can be like, it can be podcasting. It can be like other content like TikTok, whatever. It's just important that you build your brand. That's like one of the most defensible things you can do. So if you connect people, that's a good thing. If you build your brand, that's a good thing. And then finally, just like be relentless, like keep messaging people until someone gives you a shot, and eventually someone will. And then that's a great way to get started.
Amazing. Yeah. All of it boils down to taking initiative and action and just being active in the community and talking to more people in that space.
100%.
Awesome. Thank you, Caleb, for your insightful answers. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. It was a great session. The recording will be provided to you via email. And for those of who are in the current program, good luck with finishing it. Make sure you take note of the deadlines. And if you have any questions, any further questions, feel free to connect with Caleb on LinkedIn, and also reach out to us on Discord, and we'll be happy to answer your questions there. Awesome. Thanks, everybody. We'll wrap up the session here, and I'll stop the recording. We'll see you guys on a future entry-level event or in Discord.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Thanks for coming.